Hi, everybody. It's Lori White from the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and welcome to episode number 112 of Chamber TV. And today, a great topic. And it's so good, in fact, that I want to point out that we are live on Facebook, we are live on Twitter, we are live on YouTube, and we have tons of people pre-registered for this. And the subject is understanding your behaviors so that you can engage better in the workplace and be a more effective person, coworker, leader. And we've got a great subject matter expert with us today, Beth Carter. She's an executive coach. She's a life coach. She's a certified HR recruiter. She has tons of experience. She's a professor. She's written plenty of books. She has so many titles, actually, and so many credentials that I don't want to do her short shrift. So I'm going to say hello to you, Beth. How are you today?
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just begin by level setting. Tell us a little bit about your expertise and your credentials, because they are, in fact, impressive.
So I kind of classify myself as a human capital leadership and development specialist. And what that means is that I help human capital on all different facets. So I am a corporate trainer and a keynote speaker, but I'm also a certified executive business and career coach. I'm an adjunct professor at several universities in Rhode Island, and I am been an executive recruiter for over 30 years. So I've kind of seen all facets of the workplace in terms of leadership, development, communications, and of course, behaviors. So I'm very thrilled to be here today to talk to you about how your behaviors can affect the way you engage with others. So, Lori, did you have another question before I get started?
No, I just want to say that, this is a great topic, and it's one that lots of folks are wrestling with. I hear a lot of people questioning, they want to know, during this period after, the after effect of pandemic, when people are learning and interacting on a whole bunch of different levels, new levels, that they need to, maybe reinvent themselves, if you will, and think about how they, in fact, are coming off to others. So I know that's why you came to us with this topic. We thought it was a great topic. So let me just turn it back to you and ask you to lead us through your material.
Great. So before I get started, I want to mention something about perception. So there's a famous line that I learned very early on, that there's no such thing as reality. Reality is what you perceive. Thus, your perception of life is your reality. So as we go through today, really think about times where there's been miscommunication, or you're just not butting heads with someone or whatever, because the way you see things is not necessarily the way others see things. So here's an example. If Lori and I go to the movies and we walk out of the movies at the end, she says, "Oh, I love that movie, especially this one particular scene." And I'm like, "I hated that movie, and I don't even remember that scene." It's our perception, same movie, but the way we perceive it is very differently. So just keep that in mind as we go through today. All right, Mike, why don't we go to the next slide? So hopefully you all took the DISC assessment before you came on today. And so I want to talk about what DISC really is, because there is some confusion about it. It's not only a universal language, but it's observable, meaning that even though I'm a DISC expert, I can pick up on different cues. But the idea is after today that you can pick up on these different cues. So it's observable. So even from across the room, you could start to pick up on what someone's DISC is. But it only extends to behaviors and emotions. So really it's how we act. And again, focus on the how. There's another assessment that would focus on the motivators part, and that's why we behave a certain way. So we are focusing on how we act. And if we're better understand how we act, we hopefully are more sensitive to how others behave, how others act, and we can have a better relationship. So that's the key thing. It's a neutral language. And what that means is that it doesn't take into consideration other things. It's all that what you can observe, and again, how you react. So it's not only the way we act, but how we react to certain situations as we move forward. Mike, next slide, please. So what is it not? It doesn't measure your intelligence. It has nothing to do with your aptitude. It doesn't even talk about your values. It doesn't even measure your skills and experience, your education, your training. The nice thing with DISC is that most of us remember what our DISC is, right? It's easy to remember, but two people could be very different. Someone could have a graduate degree, someone could have a high school degree, but they could have the same DISC style. So that's why this, and again, it's very observable. All right, Mike, next one. So why do we bother even learning about this? What's the point of this? The point of it is that we want to have better relationships with people, not just professionally, although that helps, but also personally, right? After today, you're going to view people hopefully in a different light. And hopefully people that maybe you have been struggling with in your relationship with them, that things will be better. So as an example, the reason for learning is to get to know your strengths from a behavioral standpoint. Understanding what you bring to the table. But the other thing is that we're not all perfect and we can't be everything to everybody. And that goes with our behaviors. So we have to understand what our limitations are as well. Some we may want to work on, others for the moment we want to just kind of put to the side. But we can always improve relationships. Even really good ones can be improved. Today is about self-awareness. It's understanding better who you are, again, how you behave. But as you keep going through this self-exploration, you really do understand better how others behave. It can work really well in team building situations. I actually teach team building and conflict resolution at Bryant University, and we use the DISC. I use the DISC in all my classes, to be honest with you, both in corporate trainings as well as in academia. And everyone walks away saying, wow, now I understand better why I act a certain way and how when I'm working or interacting with someone else, we either clash or we mesh really well. It helps with conflict too, because as we go through this, we again see things through someone else's eyes. We're being empathetic. We're not necessarily agreeing with them, but we are putting ourselves in the other person's shoes and we show empathy towards them. As you go through this too, you think about your emotional intelligence as well, right? People with high emotional intelligence are very self-aware, not only understand their emotions, but also know how to regulate and control their emotions. And that's what DISC brings out as well. If you have a better working environment because people are getting along well, needless to say, you're going to have greater productivity and efficiency. And also, again, the more self-aware you are, people trust you, you build credibility, and frankly, your confidence goes up as well. Next slide, Mike. So I'm going to do very high level for the moment on what the DISC is, and then we'll go deeper in each one. And by the way, if you have questions throughout, please put them in the chat because I would rather address them at that time instead of at the end, but I'll take questions at the end as well. So if you looked at your DISC report, you might have had capital letters and small letters. The capital letter is the one I'm going to focus on today, but I will mention what the small letters are. So the capital letter is your dominant person, is your primary DISC style, okay? Your primary DISC style. Some of you may actually have 2 capital letters. There's a slim chance you could have 3. Most people only have 1. So the idea is that if you were on a grid, like on a chart, when you have a high letter, that capital letter, you're over 50% over what they call the energy line. Anything underneath that would be the small letter. So let's start with the D's. D stands for dominance, but I also kind of call D determined. They're very ambitious people, they're very forceful, and they can be very decisive. If I is your high style, then you're very expressive, enthusiastic, and friendly. You'll learn very quickly that I am a high I. S's stand for steadiness, also could stand for stable, and they're very methodical, systematic, and reliable. And then the C, of course, stands for compliance, but it's almost like a checks and balances with the people who have C's. They're very analytical, contemplative, and conservative. So let's go a little deeper into each one. Next slide, Mike. So let's talk about the Ds. I used to actually be a very high D. And one thing about the DISC assessment I want to mention is you can take it every 9 months. So the nice thing is you can set some goals with the DISC and then see how you've changed. So maybe for argument's sake, you're not as forthcoming as you'd like to be. So maybe your D is very low. It's not even on, it's not even a little letter. It's just not even showing. So you might want to work on that. Maybe have a voice at the table versus a voice on the wall, as I call it. And like 9 months later, you take the DISC again. So you can keep taking it. And that's the nice thing about it, because it's not set in stone that this will be it for the rest of your life. When I first started my company over almost 30 years ago, September will be 30 years, I started my search firm. I was an extremely high D. I was off the charts high D. So what does that mean? It was a challenge. I was trying to start my own business. I was definitely trying to win out over my competitors. It was fast paced because I was working a lot of hours trying to bring in business and conducting searches and all of that. But the other thing Ds can be very outspoken. We're very results driven. And some other people that's mentioned, we talk about Barbara Walters, Gordon Ramsay, Steve Jobs. A couple others are Donald Trump, Kobe Bryant. And then I also like to bring in someone that we all can relate to from a Disney perspective. So if you think of Mufasa in The Lion King, he directed his kingdom, right? You did not mess with Mufasa. He was always, on top of things. He wasn't outspoken in a loud way, but he definitely, when he spoke, you listened. And that's what Ds are all about. The thing with Ds too is that they can be a bit impatient. So they can be quick to anger sometimes, but in general, it's just more that they like to run the show. So if it's in a team environment and you have a D, they're the ones who tend to take control, which can be a really good thing. If you have 2 Ds on the team, that can be a little challenging because who's going to, overstep the other one? So there's some definite pluses to Ds. Next one. So the next one is high Is. And again, that's for influence. But I also would call high Is very innovative. They tend to be very creative thinkers. They need to interact with others. So high Is might be having a bit of a trouble right now during the pandemic in the sense that they like that interaction. They like to be liked. They're very outgoing. They like to be the life of the party. They can be very talkative. Trying to get an I to stop talking can be a challenge. They like to be involved in everything, and sometimes they overcommit for that reason. But the other thing about them is they can be sensitive. High Is don't do well with, I wouldn't say feedback, but critical feedback might be a little challenging for them. So if you think about some of the high Is, you think about like Taylor Swift, Will Smith, Eddie Murphy, people along those lines. And if you know the movie The Little Mermaid, if you recall correctly, Ariel knew every single person in that ocean. And it's not that she knew their names. She knew things about them. She made it a point to really get to know people. And that's what high Is are well known for. They like to really go deep and learn more about each and every person. Next one, Mike. So S stands for steadiness. It also can stand for stable. S's are pretty much very even keeled. They have the strong desire to serve. And if you think about like Mother Teresa, Laura Bush, Michelle Obama, they had that need to serve. They're extremely loyal. If you have an S as a friend, believe me, they will be loyal to you to the end of time. They're also very good team players. And they tend to keep, to be honest with you, they're the ones who usually keep the Ds and Is on track. But the thing with S's is because they're stable and very steady, they really want to finish everything they start. So they have a tough time of letting go. So if the team is working on a project and needs to pivot, S's may have a tough time doing that. They're very even-tempered, and they tend to be like the peacemaker. They're also very patient. So if you think of like Mr. Rogers, Tom Hanks, people like that, they fall into the S category. My sister-in-law, actually, the other Beth Carter, then she is Beth Carter, She is an S. So we will talk in a few minutes where we share certain traits and where we don't. But Beth is probably one of the most even-tempered, really, just very stable person. She's a very calming person for that reason too. That's why I like being around my sister-in-law. All right, the next one. So the last is the C's. And C's stands for compliance. It also stands for correctness. One good thing about C's is that if you need a report to be read or having someone on your team that needs to do like checks and balances, C's are excellent at this. They need procedures. They need proof. They're very accurate. They value accuracy. They're highly organized, and they're very logical in their thinking. They're very data-driven for that matter, and they're very detailed-oriented. And the thing with C's is that they're the ones that, if you are kind of scattered and don't know where to go or how to do something or how to even put a plan together, the C's are the ones you want to have in your court to help you with that. So if you think of people like Arianna Huffington, who used to own the Huff Post, Bill Belichick, Alan Greenspan, that really fits who they are. And if you think about Jiminy Cricket in Pinocchio, right? He always was very, trying to keep Pinocchio on track so that Pinocchio could eventually be a real boy. So they're kind of our conscious too. So that's what's nice about having C's around. Again, if there's any questions, please put it in the chat. So maybe for fun, why doesn't everyone put in their capital letters in the chat, just so we can see who we have on this session? And Mike, can we switch to the next slide, please? So while you're putting in that, let's talk about what's the differences between them. So D's and I's are extroverts. S's and C's are introverts. And a lot of people are a little confused about the difference between extroverts and introverts. Extroverts get their energy, again, from others. They like to be around other people. They're the ones who appreciate water cooler talk or break room talk. Again, they might be having a tough time with the pandemic, working from home, but they really like that interaction. And they like the spontaneity usually with that. Introverts, on the other hand, sometimes get a bad rep. A lot of people think that introverts are shy. And to some extent, they can be, but not all introverts are truly shy. The difference really is the idea that they need time to process information. So if I'm talking to Laurie, for argument's sake, and she's an introvert, she may need a couple minutes or a couple seconds to think about what I'm saying. So, but that makes extroverts very nervous. Extroverts don't like silence. I'm terrible. I get in the car, and if the radio goes silent, I'm like pushing buttons. My patience level is really bad. So the idea is that we have to think about, again, trying to come together. So my former boss, I used to work at KPMG many years ago. He was a true extrovert. And as I said, I was a high I with a very close D behind it. So he was an introvert. I was an extrovert. So we would be in a meeting. And if I bounce from topic to topic to topic, really what would happen is you could see his head spinning. He wasn't staying on track with me. I think he was getting a little frustrated with me and all of that. So I learned very quickly that I had to say to Charlie, are we finished with this topic? Can we go on to the next topic? And then I would pause. As much as it killed me to do it, I would pause. And if he said yes, then we could move on. If he said no, then we would talk about it a little bit more. And if you think about it, it's not just because he was my boss, but if he was another person I was trying to have a better relationship with, it was very respectful to do that. So in an hour-long meeting, we might have 6 topics, and I may have to ask that question numerous times. But it really did, once I figured that out, and it took me a while to do it, it really worked better. So if you are a high I or a high D, and you are struggling with people who are high S's, high C's, then you really have to think about how you can make that better. And part of it is just for the D's and I's to be quiet at times and let the S's and the C's really take in what you're saying. There's another piece to this as well. Some people are people-oriented. I's and S's are people-oriented. So we value people over tasks. D's and C's are task-oriented. So again, you have to think about that. So as I mentioned my sister-in-law before, she's a high S. I'm a high I. What we have in common is we're very people-oriented. And it's very true. That's one thing that we value very much. We value our family, we value relationships, all of that. And if we want to do something for someone, we'd rather do that than do a to-do list a mile long or whatever it may be. D's and C's, on the other hand, tend to focus on tasks. They like having that to-do list. They like getting things done. That makes them feel good. So can you be like some of you I'm noticing in the chat, you might have two high letters and you might be on different perspectives. Kathy here is an S and an I. So the nice thing is that she's obviously very people-oriented. As I said, I's and S's are people-oriented. But there's times that she might be more extroverted and there might be times she's more introverted. How is that possible? Well, you could say it's situational and that could be true. But a lot of times it really comes down to, are you at home or in a home environment outside of the office, or are you in the office? And so you might be a little bit more extroverted at work and a little more introverted at home, or vice versa. So it's something for you to think about and become more aware as you move forward. The other thing is that how did you even get these letters, right? What was the thought process here? So when you took the DISC assessment, it asked you about the 4 words that, one that's least like you and the one that's most like you. The thing is that we are actually more passionate about what we don't like than what we do like. So for argument's sake, let's say I said to Laurie, hey, let's go out and get pizza. And she's like, sure, that's great. But I say to her, let's put anchovies on. She's like, I hate anchovies. So she will not eat the pizza. If I say to her, okay, how about vegetables, pepperoni, whatever, she might say yes. So think about something that you really don't like, food, something, maybe it's a type of movie, music, whatever it may be. You're very passionate about what you don't like. And that actually derives part of your DISC assessment because that talks about how you are at home. So again, and then the other part is how you are at work. So when I said you could take the DISC assessment every 9 months, really the way you are at home probably won't change much. It's more that you are at work. Because what they call the home state, DISC calls the home state is the adaptive state or the mask state. And that's because not everybody, but some people go to work and they kind of put a mask on. They're kind of a different person. And in a pandemic or when the economy's bad, we tend to see people putting more of a mask on. They might be afraid to lose their job. Maybe they're doing jobs of 2 or 3 people, things along those lines. So are you really the same person in both scenarios? Maybe, maybe not. But the idea is that, again, you could have tendencies maybe being a little more people-oriented at home versus task-oriented or vice versa. You could be a little more extroverted at times versus introverted. So that's really for people who have 2 high letters. But again, you could take the DISC 9 months later. You maybe only had 1 high letter now, but it could change over time. So I want you, Mike, can you switch slides, please? I want you to think, I want to put this into play. So I want you to kind of think about your boss's DISC. Now, if you don't have a boss, think about a past boss, okay? I'm sure everybody's had a past boss. So first think about, are they extroverted or are they introverted? So think for a second about that. So if they're extroverted, they're either a D or an I. If they're introverted, they're an S or a C. So write down your thought on that for a second. Now, it may change in a minute. Then ask yourself, well, my boss is an extrovert. Is he task-oriented or people-oriented? If he's task-oriented and he's an extrovert, he's a D. If he's people-oriented and an extrovert, he's an I. So think about that. Now, what if your boss, like my boss, Charlie, was an introvert? Charlie was very people-oriented. He's like my sister-in-law, so he is an S. But if you had a boss that was introverted and is task-oriented, it's a C. So in the chat, maybe you want to put in, is your disc very different from your boss's disc or your past boss disc? And the reason why I ask you to do that is because when we really analyze our boss or our past boss, did we have a good working relationship with them or did we not? So as an example, again, if, with Charlie, we had in common, we were both very people-oriented. So that's where our commonality was. Maybe if Charlie was a C, which is my total opposite, so I'm extroverted, people-oriented. If he was a C, he would have been introverted, task-oriented. We would have had to figure out a way to come together. So again, not just me pausing in conversation and asking if we can move on to things, but maybe I needed to kind of tweak my behavior a little bit to be more task-oriented. And remember, C's are organized. Maybe be a little more organized, be a little bit more, checking my reports, make sure there's no errors than I would have been in the past. So that's why you need to think about, is this working? Is it not? And why is it not working? And what can I do to kind of tweak my behaviors to make it a better relationship? I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. It doesn't matter what order the letters are in. Someone asked if you have two letters, is there a difference in the order they're listed? No, there's no difference. For whatever reason, they put it that way. You may be slightly stronger in one versus the other, but to be honest with you, I wouldn't even worry about it. So that's not a problem. But I would be interested to hear your thoughts. Do you get along with your boss or don't you? And have you kind of figured out now by doing this exercise, does that make sense? So I'll be interested to hear what you have to say on that. All right, Mike, next one. So again, this is all about self-awareness, okay? As I said right from the beginning. And as you go through your day today, think about the types of people you're interacting with. And remember, this is observable behavior. So even if you're like in the grocery store, are you the type of person who will strike up a conversation with someone, the checkout person? Hi, how was your day? Can you believe we're getting another snowstorm? That's me. That's me. Or are you very you have all your groceries on the belt, very, organized, like the frozen's together with the refrigerators next and the non-refrigerated is it all very, systemized, right? It's probably a C. Do you not really talk to the clerk? You just want to know what the price is, want to get out of there. If you see that the clerk is chatting with the person in front of you, do you get a little frustrated? You want to control the situation. That might be a D. So be aware of yourself, even when you go through non-threatening or non-business type of interactions, and you might be very surprised how you see the world. The other thing is that we have to be careful with our word choice. So D's, again, are very direct. They tend to use action words, and they tend to keep their sentences very short. Do this, do that, conduct this training, don't talk so much, whatever it may be, right? They're very direct that way. I's, on the other hand, hate to say it, we tend to ramble a little bit. We like to talk. We like that chit chat. So at the beginning of an in-person training or whatever, I may do a little bit of chit chat. That might drive the D's crazy. They want to get going on this. The S's also, the S's, they may not say a lot, but they're taking it all in. And they're going to back you up if someone is going after you. That's the way S's are. And then the C's are going to be there with their report and they're checking the boxes off. And don't feel called out, Heather, that you're a C. C's are great. So don't feel called out. But the thing is that with the C's, they have their reports and they check the boxes. And you know what? The great thing about C's are that I love is that, again, there are checks and balances for someone who's like me. So I might do a real quick read over a report, and you know what? I'm going to miss something. I can guarantee it. The C's, on the other hand, they'll be like, Beth, did you notice this? Did you notice that? And they're very diplomatic too. So it's not like C's are really bad people, but they will notice things that you may not notice. So no, C's are really good. Don't worry about that. We also have to think about our nonverbal communication. So it's not just the way we say things, but it's the way our nonverbal communication, because actually nonverbal communication, if you look at a pie chart, is actually a bigger piece of the way we communicate than actually our words. So the thing is that D's, again, might be very pointer finger, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this. They might also kind of have this intense look on their face. Not a bad thing. It just, they mean business. I's, on the other hand, we talk a lot with our hands. If you noticed already, I've talked a lot with my hands. S's, on the other hand, may have their hands in their lap. And again, they're kind of on the quieter side potentially, but they're taking it all in. My sister-in-law misses nothing. Let me tell you, I know she doesn't. And I always kid around and says, I may talk, but when my sister-in-law Beth talks, you need to listen, because she may not say a lot, but whatever she says is always important. I've learned a lot from her. And then the C's, again, they may be, they're introverted, right? But their brain is working, and they're sitting there thinking, okay, now what's next? What's next? What's next? How do we do this? What's next? It's, so it's all good. But the thing is, on a team, you want to have all of that, right? You want to have a balanced team. So if you sit down with your coworkers and they all take the disc, you could almost like plot it. Do we have, a couple of D's, couple I's, couple S's, couple C's? What if you have no C's? Well, maybe then when you go to recruit another person, maybe that's what you need. You need to have, because you really should have a balanced team. If you have too many I's and one C, and that's all you have, the I's are very chatty. One, it's going to drive the C's crazy, but also they're not going to get anything done, because I's are chit-chatting about all things. They digress. They go all over the place, right? C's will rein them in, but you need more balance in that. So really think about, if you're hiring people, what will be a good addition. I feel like I'm a little bit all over. Okay, so Tara says in ways she feels like she's all over the place a little bit with her disc. I think after today, you might be have a little more clarity, and you might be surprised that you do zero in on a particular style. So hopefully that will help, Tara. The other thing is that I always say to people, do your homework. And what I mean by that is that it's really talking about if you're meeting a new person or something. Remember, I said DISC is observable behavior. So the thing is, even looking at someone's LinkedIn, you can figure out to some extent how they are. If they're very short sentences, very direct, obviously kind of taking a leader role potentially, or just like to run the show. It doesn't have to be the leader per se. They might be a D. If someone does a lot of words, things along those lines, they may be an I. If C's put a lot of metrics in, that would possibly be a possibility. S's might talk more about being a team player, things along those lines. So even something like a LinkedIn or a press release really can bring out, you can even start to pick up potentially on someone's behaviors. But in general, it's more observable, needless to say, face-to-face, or in the world we live in right now via Zoom. The thing is, you want to try to identify their DISC style. So again, trying to figure out what's the best way to work with them. And then how are you going to adjust your DISC style to better relate to the other person, just like I did with Charlie. And again, the more self-aware you are, you can pick up on cues, both verbal and nonverbal cues. If you're talking to someone who is, let's say, a C or a D, remember they're very task-oriented, and you're chit-chatting away and you kind of see the eye roll going, or they're looking at their papers or whatever, and they're not really focused on you, you need to then pull back a little bit. So that helps. The other thing you need to do after today is really reflect. Think about what you've learned, evaluate each relationship. And we're going to do an exercise right now to go along with that. So Mike, can you don't really need to go to my next screen. It just says exercise on it. So what I want you to do right now is take a piece of paper, put your name at the top, and put your DISC. Then I want you to think of a unit of people that you hang out with. It can be your coworkers, It could be family, like if you have a significant other and kids or just a significant other, circle of friends, whatever it may be, and write their names below. Give it a little bit of space. And then what I'd like you to do is try to figure out of that group of people. So let's say it's 4 people. Try to figure out which ones are the extroverts of that group and maybe put a little E under their name. Take a second and do that. And then of course, the ones you don't put an E under, you put an I. Then the next thing I want you to do is figure out of those 4 people, or how many it is, how many are people-oriented? How many really kind of focus more on the relationships and people-oriented type of activities versus task-oriented? So maybe put like a little P under those people's names. They're people-oriented. And then of course, the ones that are left are task-oriented. Now, I'll just go over this again. D's are extroverted and task-oriented. So then if you have some of those on your list, put a D under their name. If they're extroverted and people-oriented, they're I's. Put the I's down. S's are introverted and people-oriented. So put S's under those people. And then the last is introverted and task-oriented, and put a C. When you look at this, think about of that unit of people, who do you get along with better and who do you not? So as I mentioned before, if you are a high I like me, your total opposite is a C. Do I get along with C's? Better now than I did before. But again, it is a challenge sometimes. Not because C's are bad, nothing against C's, but I'm just totally opposite of the way they behave. So I have to sometimes rein in how I communicate, keep maybe my sentences a little shorter, be more cognizant of, making errors, things along those lines. I'd love to hear in the chat if you finding that this has been a little eye-opening to you. I do this in my trainings, and all of a sudden people, they'll look at, they'll put all their coworkers down as an example, and they're like, oh, now I understand why I'm having a tough time working with this person. Or really drives me crazy when John and Sally, who are both I's, are chit-chatting away and I'm trying to get my work done, or we're in a meeting and the meeting lasts 2 hours when it could last an hour. Think about, and it's not just frustrations too, it's things that you really enjoy. I really like working with so-and-so. They're a high D and I'm an I, and even though, we're both extroverts, the D tends to keep me on track, which I need sometimes because I's can be a little disorganized. Really figure out, how is this working from a relationship standpoint? So put in the chat if you're finding that this is helping you in regards to this unit of people that you're looking at. The other thing to keep in mind too is how are you going to change? And I'm not saying you have to always change your behaviors. But again, if you're trying to have a better relationship with someone, maybe you do need to rein it in sometimes and think about, again, tweaking. So if you're thinking this way and acting this way and the other person's like this, how can you come a little closer together? So again, like the example with my boss, Charlie, I learned to pause. I learned to be quiet and think about how he's taking it in. So Nicole says she's apparently gets along better with I's and D's. Okay, that's great. So if you get along better with I's and D's, then how in the future are you going to get along with S's and C's? So it'll be interesting to see how she reacts to that and how she's going to think through. The thing too is that what do you want to get out of the relationship? I mean, that's really the bottom line on all this. You want a win-win situation here, right? You don't always want to be in conflict with another person, especially if they're coworkers. You can't get rid of your coworkers. So how are you going to have a better relationship with them? My son, my oldest son, is exactly like I am. He's a high D right now, but I definitely can see how his I is starting to take over, just like it did with me. Because as I got more comfortable with my business, my I is now very high, but my D is very close. So I understand where he gets frustrated at times. I understand when he gets angry. I understand better how he doesn't relate necessarily to his brother, who's the total opposite of him. And I try to explain this to him. But when you see it in black and white and you do exercises like this, it really hopefully will come to the forefront on how you can work better with others. Okay, next slide. There should be another slide. Next one. There we go. Okay, so these are some of the other things I want you to ponder. When you have a free moment, and I don't mean right this minute, I would like you maybe this weekend or sometime soon, read the assessment again with a new pair of eyes. Take notes and really write down your feelings as you go through it. You may not agree with everything on the assessment, and that's fine. But if you're disagreeing with a piece of it, think about really why you're disagreeing with it. Is it really something that, maybe you've just been blind to it? Remember, your reality is based off your perception, right? So maybe the way you perceive it is not necessarily the way others perceive it. Maybe have conversations with someone who's very objective and say, my DISC assessment says that I'm an S and that I'm an introvert and I'm people-oriented. Do you think that's true? Can you give me an example of where you see that in me? And really, again, really try to take it all in. Then, as we just did this exercise, maybe do this exercise with another group or unit of people that you hang out with and identify their behaviors and how you can interact better with them. Because we tend to put the onus on the other person. Oh, they're lazy. Oh, they're disorganized. Oh, they talk too much. Oh, they don't talk at all. Whatever it may be. But in reality is they may see it differently. So how do you do that, right? How do you figure out how to interact with them better? And maybe having a fruitful conversation. I love when I do corporate trainings and the person goes back with their DISC and they talk to their significant other. It's always an interesting conversation when I get the feedback from them after. Wow, my wife totally agrees with this because of this, this, and this. Or, we had a very interesting conversation how we could interact better and where we butt heads. So it can be, you can have some very interesting conversations, and I highly recommend that you try it. So do get feedback from others. If you want to, not just because if even one person gives you some eye-opening comment, it may affect other relationships that you hadn't realized could be even better. And then the last thing is that you want to create what I refer to as a SWOT analysis. So what are your strengths? Go through the DISC assessment again. What are your strengths? And every letter has strengths, no doubt about it. And I'm not calling out the C's because the C's have strengths. What are areas you can work on? Mine is really picking up on cues and maybe not talking as much, letting other people have voice at the table. Where are the opportunities for that then? Where can I use this in different ways and have the opportunities to have that better relationship? And where do I feel threatened? Maybe I don't like the feedback that I hear. Maybe I don't like seeing the DISC assessment in black and white telling me these are some of the things. Maybe I feel a little threatened by it. But then go deeper into your feelings and why do you feel threatened by it? And what's the cause of it? So really thinking through how you can, have these better relationships, and maybe start with low-hanging fruit. What I mean by that is maybe someone you really trust. Have this conversation first and hear what they have to say. Then maybe take it to your boss, take it to coworkers, take it to somebody else. Maybe it's a mother-in-law, father-in-law situation. Maybe you don't have a good relationship with them. Maybe then having an honest conversation with them and say, I realize some of the way I behave, obviously you don't like. I'd like to have a dialogue with you. So it's a great way to open up communications, but you have to be open to getting them too. All right, it looks like we're coming to the end of time here. Anyone have any questions? Because I'd like to be able to address them. I know we've covered a lot in a short period of time. But, that's why I am a disc expert. I feel that it's a really valuable tool that you can use. And as I said, I realize as I learn from other people's discs, why I work well with them. Maybe some, it's a little bit more of a challenge, no doubt about it. But I really try to take a step back and say, all right, if this relationship is, important to me, then how am I going to handle it? If you have questions after and you don't want to put them in the chat, you certainly can reach out to me. There's my email address, and I'm on Twitter. I also have a blog series, so you can go on bethcarterenterprises.com. I have actually several blog series. I just finished one on the ABCs of your career journey. I like to do the ABCs because it keeps me on track. Because again, eyes can be disorganized. And I'm also offering a free 20-minute coaching session for anyone who would like it. So I appreciate your time today. Again, if there's any questions, please put them in the chat. And I'll turn it over to Laurie.
Thank you, Beth. That was great. While we're waiting for some questions, I've had a couple of my own. First one is, how does the DISC assessment work with, or, is there a preference over like, for instance, Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder or any one of the other assessment tools that are out there that are popular in the HR sphere?
Right. And that's a very good question. So the thing with Myers-Briggs is that it rarely changes. You need to have some kind of life event to happen that your 4 letters may change. And a lot of people don't remember 4 letters. It's easy to say, hey, I'm a high D or I'm a high S, right? But Myers-Briggs, it rarely changes. So it's hard to set goals to it if you want to improve your behaviors on certain areas. StrengthsFinders, tends to get, and I'm not an expert on StrengthsFinders, but the way I say it is more on some of your technical skills, soft skills. So it really goes again to the skills. Now remember, DISC is not about skills, it's about behaviors and actions. So that's really the differences between the 3 different assessments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So question that kind of builds on that, can you really change your, your letter as life progresses, or are you born this way? I know the distinction is this is how you appear to others. But if you want to change, does that really mean you are changed versus, appearing to change, if you get my drift?
No, and that, again, very good question, because yes, we could put that mask on and be a different person and act that way. But long term, one, it's not good for your health because it's very stressful. So there's more in-depth discs, and if anyone's interested in that, they can reach out to me too. But we saw when the economy tanked back in 2008, 9, and 10, that a lot of people's they actually showed physical graphs. You could see graphs of both the disc at home and disc at work. And if the graphs were very different, it really actually alluded to the fact that the person was under a lot of stress. So yes, you can kind of fake it if you want to call it that way. But if you're really intent on changing your letter, then you do need to change your behaviors. It's just like any other type of behavioral thing. If you want to lose weight, that's a behavior change, right? You eat less food, you exercise more, you're more cognizant of calorie counts, things along those lines. As I said, when I first started my company, my D was off the charts. Since then, my D has dropped and my I is off the charts. I'm definitely much more people-oriented, and it's because of what I do for a living. As a recruiter, you make a bunch of phone calls, you get your candidates, you go on. That's a D. Doing corporate trainings, doing coaching, teaching, all of that is much more people-oriented. I don't keep track of any metrics. I'm not trying to direct others. I want to help people. And that's why I think that is why my I is so much higher. Am I ever going to be a C? Probably not. My C is super tiny. It's almost non-existent. But one of the things I've learned though is that when I'm trying to write a report, for whatever reason, or I have to do something like provide information to my accountant for my taxes, I have to be much more cognizant of making sure I read it once. I read it 2 or 3 times, which kills me. I hate doing that kind of stuff. But I realize that I have to do it. So my C has gone up a little bit, but I will never be a C.
Mm-hmm. In this sphere of what we're talking about, you define the difference between an I and an E as people that get refreshed by other people, that draw their strengths from, or draw their energy from being around other people, as the E. Does this hold true in all aspects of this work?
Well, D's and I's are extroverts. That's the E. And the thing is, again, it can be situational. Some people I noticed in the chat, as I said, they might have some extrovert tendencies. They might have some introvert tendencies. I had a student come to me and ask me about that. And I said, well, in the classroom, you tend to be very extroverted. She says, I am. I said, but do you need time sometimes just to be by yourself and think about things? She goes, I do. And that's where the introvert comes in. So you can have both, but one might be more prevalent than the other. And that's okay. And that too can change over time. Maybe someone who is very introverted wants to become more extroverted. Maybe they don't even have a voice at the table. So they start taking public speaking classes, or, some kind of work with a coach on their confidence, things along those lines. So their introvertness might go down a bit and their extrovert goes up.
So there's really no right and wrong persona. Is there something that you would coach folks on if they want to be leaders, if they want to run the company, or they want to run their division, or they want a promotion? Is there a way that people should look at their own assessment and figure out where's the best place to be?
Well, the thing is that there's no one position, accountant, salesperson, whatever, that you should be, a D over a C or I or whatever, right? And it's the same with leadership. There are leaders, and I gave you examples in each case, and there's leaders in each of those cases. So it's just the way that they do it, and it works and again, who's the team underneath? So if you have a D boss and you're more of an S, that can work, it cannot work, right? So anyone can be a leader, be in a leadership position, but they have to recognize the fact that this is the way they lead, and how are they going to engage others? So really the leader, if anybody, has to be more self-aware than the team, because they have to, not only give directives, but they have to motivate their team to perform at peak performance. But it's just the way they go about doing it. And some people react well with that, and some people don't react well. There's people, on today's call who doesn't get along well with their boss, maybe because they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. But it's really the leader's responsibility to, again, tweak behavior to align better with the team members, or they're going to leave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeff has some interesting observations here. We have one on the screen, but he also says, I changed from a D to an I, and your personal explanation was very helpful. So during the course of the discussion, he became more nuanced in understanding his behavior. And then he points out that with Myers-Briggs, he's on the line between extrovert and introvert. At work, I have to be extroverted. On a personal level, personal time, I like to disengage, be by myself, get away from people, sort of recharge in that way. So there's an example of, the yin and yang of it all.
Right. And the thing is, we do change over time. I mean, for a variety of different reasons, we change over time, not that I'm a life coach, but life changes, maybe, having a family, or getting married, or getting divorced, or losing your job, and it could be something even good, buying a house, adopting a puppy, all those kind of life changes can affect your behaviors in some ways. Maybe you're an introvert and you get a dog. Like my neighborhood's quite the dog, and we live in kind of a circle, and everybody walks their dogs. And, maybe someone who was very introverted and didn't speak a lot, now people are asking questions about the puppy, and now you're talking to people and you realize, hey, it's great. I'm getting some energy from these people, and maybe you become a little more extroverted. So there's a lot of different reasons why your DISC can change. And that's why I like DISC, because it can change over time versus the Myers-Briggs. As I said, most cases, it doesn't change much, if at all.
I imagine it would be helpful when people take the test, that they don't go into it with any preconceived notions of who they are. But when you first started it, you outlined, the various, definitions of DISC. People probably, myself included, said, oh yeah, I'm right there. I'm in this, I'm in that. But then at the end, you have to be open to the fact that, maybe you're not what you think you are.
Exactly right. That's why I always tell whoever I suggest taking it, do not overthink this. Just go with your gut and answer the question. And I periodically take it too, because, you can't be a disc expert and not take it periodically, just to remind yourself of who you are too, because I changed too over time.
Yeah. Great. So once again, we are live on Facebook. We are live on Twitter. We are live on YouTube. This is episode number 112 of Chamber TV. If you're interested in this program and you want to look at it again, go to our chamber website, propchamber.com, and all of our materials, all of our webcasts are up there, so you can review them again at your leisure. So Beth, I want to ask you to just leave us with some parting thoughts about what you recommend for next steps. And I know you've been very generous as well in indicating that you're offering 20 minutes of free coaching for anybody that's watching this program. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. So it's a pleasure being here today. Hopefully everybody got a lot out of it. But again, I would like you to take the time to kind of sit down and reread the report. You might not have even read the whole report. You might have only read the first page, which a lot of people do. But really think through and then have an open dialogue with someone. Maybe not the person that you're challenged in your relationship with, maybe someone you do get along very well with, and get their thoughts on it. Maybe even get them to take the disc. It's free. You can share that link with someone. But the other thing I want you to think about is, again, your perception. Is your perception this way so much so that you don't think about what others are? Again, be empathetic. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. See it from their perspective. And see if that's helping with the relationship. Because in the long run, and especially under these trying times, you might be with people in your own household that you see every day, and tensions are high. So I would really think about how you can make those relationships better, because in the long run, it's going to be a win-lose situation. You'd rather have it a win-win. And as I said with your coworkers, they're not going away. So you need to think of ways to work better with them, just like I did with my boss, Charlie. And believe me, it was great once I figured that out. It took a while, as I said, but in the end, our relationship was so much better, and it really was good. It was a good thing. So, but if anyone has any final questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. And I hear a lot of thank yous, so I'm glad you enjoyed this. I'm glad you got something out of it. That's why I love doing discs, because I think it really is a very valuable.
Yeah. So let me just call out a few of these. Joni says, excellent presentation. Nicole says, this has been very interesting. Thank you so much. Be Awesome says, you are awesome. That is cool. And
oh, wow.
Nancy says, very interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I think folks really got a lot out of this. And one of the, the most interesting points you made is that you really got to be honest with yourself when you take it, and really understand that, you got to take it with, where you are right now in life, not where you were 20 years ago, or where you think, you are, historically. Oh, I've always been this, I've always been that. But go into it with fresh eyes, and you might be surprised at what you'll learn. Deb says, thank you. Jeff says, very enlightening. Deb, who works for us at the Chamber, said this was awesome. So Deb, I'm interested. I'm going to have to ask you later what you think I am.
That will be an interesting conversation. I want to be a fly on the wall on that one.
Okay. You don't have to be a fan. You can just be part of it.
Okay.
Heather says, very insightful. Thank you. Lisa says, great comparison for team members. We are all discussing, and it's very informative. So yeah, I love this feedback. So keep going, folks. I want to keep putting this out there so that,
The only thing I'll add, Laurie, too, is if any company is interested in doing the disc assessment and having a much longer training on it. I'd be more than, that's something that I do for companies. And I think that, again, it really is a great team building exercise. We do some fun, much longer fun exercises. And again, the way people observe each other, can be very enlightening, as people are saying in today's call. So thank you.
So I'm observing that as a high I, you love feedback, positive feedback. So I'm going to ask our listeners to keep, throwing it out there so I can make sure Beth knows how much we really appreciate it. Deb, who works with us, says, I just spit out my water. So she's looking forward to engaging with us later. Anybody else have any feedback for Beth or any other questions before we let her go and before I let you all go? It's been a lot of fun, and that's great. So I don't see anything else in the chat. So we will call it a wrap at this point, Beth. And thank you again. And again, people should definitely review where they stand and reach out to Beth and get some more granularity around it. And don't be afraid of what your letter is, I guess. Is
exactly right. There's no bad letter. Thank you, Laurie.
All right. Thanks, Beth. Take care. We'll see everybody later. Take care.
Bye.